Welcome back into Top of the Perch. I am your host, as always, Nick Burt, here on the Nick Burt Sports Network. This episode, not going to be focused on Tottenham Hotspur, probably the only one this season. This is going to be your 2024-25 Premier League preview. The season kicks off tomorrow as of recording. Most likely when you're watching, the season kicks off today or already has kicked off. So we got a lot to get through. I'll do my official predictions going from 20-1. And within that, we'll take a look at the team that I am, of course, talking about at the moment. And we'll get a feel of what this Premier League season is going to look like. Now, if you saw the video about Tottenham Hotspur's offseason, we went through the calendar. It is going to be a mess for 7 clubs this season. Playing European football. The expanded European calendar is not going to be fun. I think it is going to very much take a toll on a lot of teams. I think there are some teams more equipped than others, and it's going to be interesting to see how they handle that. Does Premier League matches take a back seat to potential European glory? This is going to be a very interesting season to see how that goes. There's some teams that, have been in European football in past years that didn't make it this year. How are they going to bounce back from that? Is going to be quite an interesting season of Premier League football. So without further ado, I feel like this is going to be a long one. So let's get straight into it. As we take a look at this beautiful map of England, of course, we'll have the table coming up the side. Let's get straight into it. The team I have finishing in 20th is Southampton. They, of course, are coming right back up. Were relegated 2 years ago. Won the promotion playoff last year in the championship. They beat Leeds United in the final. And I think they go straight back down. Now, they've done a lot of business this summer. I mean, they've brought in a lot of players and spent a decent amount of money for a newly promoted team. I mean, you had the Taylor Harwood-Bellis signing from Manchester City. That was about 23 million euros. You had Flynn Downs brought in from West Ham. You had, Nathan Wood brought in from Swansea, a player they saw a few times last year. And you don't have, a ton of players going out. I mean, you do lose Che Adams. That was on, a free transfer. Stuart Armstrong, his contract expired. This is just, it's going to be a very difficult season, I think, for Southampton. I think they're more planning on, a long-term plan under this new ownership. I think things got accelerated just a tiny bit with this promotion. I don't think they're ready for this right now. I think another season in the championship would have done them well. I think they would have been one of the favorites to win the league and, of course, one of the favorites to get promotion once again if they didn't get it last year. But now here we are. I think this is just a tad bit too early for them. We'll see, of course. But Southampton, I personally I don't see them staying up, because if you really look at the teams that get promoted, the teams that played very well defensively in the championship tend to play very well in the Premier League defensively because they're already kind of used to that. You're playing at a higher level now. Those are the teams that seem to stay up. Southampton didn't really do that last year. I mean, they conceded 64 goals, which sat right around mid-table in the championship. I believe the stat was it was the 14th best in the championship. So, out of a league of 22 teams, that's not great. I don't see a scenario where the team on the South Coast stay up this year. I think that they are a one and done. Continue to get their parachute payments for the next 3 years, and we move on from there. I think this is going to be a difficult year for all three promoted sides. I think there's a real possibility that we see a, same as last year where all 3 promoted teams go straight back down. I think this is going to be a very, very tough year for Southampton. I think they are the worst set off of the 3, but I don't see it happening. So let's move to 19th. And in 19th, I have one of the other promoted teams, and that's Leicester City. Now, I've had Leicester City anywhere from, I believe I had them as high as 15 and as low as 19. I think this is going to be a very tough year. I mean, you lost Kieran Dewsbury-Hall to Chelsea. You lost Iheanacho to Sevilla. I mean, you're bringing in some players. Bobby Corva-Reed, you're bringing him in from Fulham. You're bringing in Michael Golding from Chelsea. Caleb Okolai, I believe is the pronunciation, from Atalanta. You're bringing him in. There were talks about Wilfred Zaha loan. It seems like that's fallen through. But I think Leicester, they need to find a way to stay up this year. But this looming potential points deduction that they may be facing, I think does not help their case at all, which is part of the reason why I have them ending up in 19th. I think that this potential, points deduction does end up happening, and I think that may just, they may get enough points without the deduction, but with the deduction, I don't know if it's, it's going to be that for them. Now, of course, they still have Jamie Vardy on this team, which is hard to believe. You brought in Harry Winks last year from Tottenham. He had a very good season in the championship. Does he, bring that extra level of Premier League football back to this Leicester City squad? I think this is going to be a very tough year for them. If this points deduction comes to be, I think this will be a very long season for Leicester City. It will be very difficult for them to get out of the basement. Well, of course, Southampton will be there too. But I think this is going to be a very tough year. If this points deduction comes to be, Steve Cooper doesn't play the most brilliant of football. It's not awful. I believe if Marcelea, I believe is the pronunciation. I could totally butchered that. But the manager that has gone on to Chelsea, if he was leading Leicester up, I think they would have a better shot of staying. Steve Cooper just isn't that great, honestly. So I would not be surprised if Leicester City once again goes straight down. In 18th, the final relegated team potentially, I have the eternal rivals for Leicester City, and that's Nottingham Forest. Now, that does come to a bit of shock. I do have the other, promoted side staying up this year. I will make the case for them in a minute. Nottingham Forest, I feel like they've been flirting with disaster every single year since they've gone up, and this will be their 3rd year up, I believe. It always seems like they're flirting with disaster, and I think there's potentially another points deduction looming for Nottingham Forest, which I don't know. But one of the main struggles for this team last year was at the goalkeeper position. And, they went through, I believe, 3 different goalkeepers last year. Matt Turner, Matt Sells, and Vlahovic, I believe it was, or Vladkadamos. It was a very Greek name, I know that. That was going to be a huge problem for this team, no matter what this year. They bring in Carlos Miguel from Corinthians this summer. I think that's going to be an interesting to see how he develops into Premier League football. I think he does end up being the starter. I think Matt Turner is one of the odd ones out of the goalkeepers. I think he needs to find a new place because I do not expect him to play much this year for Nottingham Forest, especially under Nuno Espirito Santo. I think he lost the confidence of him, and I don't expect to see him play this year. I mean, they did bring in a load of other players. I mean, they brought in Elliot Anderson from Newcastle, Nikola Menkelevich from Fiorentina, Jota Silva from Victoria Guimaraes. I mean, they spent the money once again this year, and they may face the potential penalty with points deduction given, some of the goings out. I mean, you did sell Vladihamovic. Again, I butchered it, but the other goalkeeper, you sold him to Newcastle in what very much seemed to be, a cap circumvention is what we call it here in America. I kind of felt like that. I don't think he's worth that much, but you also sold Niakite for around 32 million euros, I believe, to Lyon. You also sold Mangalenga to Lyon for right around 23 million euros. Again, the books, I'm sure, balance out, but I don't see a way that Nottingham Forest stay up this year. They flirt with disaster too much, and it feels like it's going to finally strike them this year. So we move on to the team that barely escapes relegation this year, and I think they escape because of potential points deductions, and that is the last promoted team, Ipswich Town. They've not been in the Premier League since 2002. It was one calendar year ago, basically, May 2023, they were promoted from the third tier. They went straight up in last year, an absolutely outstanding season from the Tractor Boys. See them finish in second place in the championship. They get promoted to the Premier League for the first time in almost a quarter of a century. I mean, Ipswich Town, they have a European trophy to their name. It's a very, very good team historically. It's just, obviously, they've been languishing these past, 20 plus years. But this is going to be a very interesting team this year. They hold on to manager Kieran McKenna, which I think is one of the main reasons why they stay up. I think if anybody else is managing this side, they're not staying up. They bring in some good players, Omari Hutchinson. They sign him to a permanent deal from Chelsea. They bring in Jacob Greaves from Hull City. I know there were a lot of, bigger clubs chasing after him. He ends up going to Ipswich. You bring in Liam Delap from Manchester City. There's a deal going down quite soon that is going to be bringing Calvin Phillips from Manchester City on a loan with option to buy, I believe. I don't believe Ipswich is done yet. This is a team that is, desperately building to stay up this year. And I think they find a way. Now, I could very much be saying this and they finish in 20th and go straight down. That's a very real possibility. But I am very interested to see how McKenna's play style, because it's a very interesting play style that got him up to the Premier League. And I'm interested to see how that develops in the Premier League when you face off against, the Man Cities, the Arsenals, the Liverpools, the Manchester Uniteds. Of course, they start off with Liverpool on Saturday. That is your early kickoff on Saturday. So it is going to be real baptism by fire for Ipswich Town. I'm really interested to see how this team plays. I think this could be a very good team. I know a lot of Ipswich fans are saying we could probably finish as high as, 13th or 12th. I'm not that optimistic. I think they escape relegation for at least a year. But I'm interested to see how this team that is now owned by Ed Sheeran, Ed Sheeran is a lifelong fan of Ipswich Town. He has been their front of shirt sponsor since 2021. He becomes, I believe it was only 1%, but he becomes the owner of his childhood club. And I mean, what can be better than that? Everybody one day wishes that they can own a piece of their childhood club. And for him, that dream has finally come true. We move up to 16th, and I have Wolverhampton Wanderers here. Wolverhampton just recently lost Pedro Neto within the last week. Of course, they're looking for a replacement for him, so obviously this could potentially change, but currently I have them finishing 16th. I had them at one point in 18th getting relegated because I truly don't know what they're doing. I really don't. I think Gary O'Neill is a good manager, but I truly don't know what their plan is whatsoever. I mean, this team, stat-wise, they were the worst non-relegated team last year. Now, they finished in 14th, but this team was not good. They stay up on their own accords, but they move on from, of course, two of their best players, which was Pedro Neto, and Max Kilman goes to West Ham for right around 48 million euros. And I don't think they brought in any truly good replacements for either of them. I don't know what they're doing, honestly. I could see a very real case for them getting relegated this year. I just kind of think the teams below them are a bit worse and potentially in, financial restriction trouble that could bring points deductions. But I don't know what Wolves are doing, honestly. I truly don't. So let's move up to 15th, and I have Brentford. Of course, Brentford, I mean, they've been a great story they were. I shouldn't say were because they still kind of are, but I also kind of think, everything we built them up to be is kind of, I won't say falling apart, but, is the more and more time you stay in the Premier League, the more adapt you're going to get to it. I mean, it's very interesting what this club is doing. I mean, they brought in Igor Thigallo from Bruges. They spent about £33 million on him. They're bringing in Fabio Carvajal from Liverpool, right around 24 million euros. On paper, I mean, this team is, XG masters on paper. In real life, I don't know. I think this is going to be a struggle this year. Of course, Ivan Toney, looms of a potential, departure before the season. Obviously, one of the big suitors for him was Tottenham. They obviously opt not to go for him. He has 1 year left on his contract. He doesn't seem to be of the mind to re-up it. So I don't know what they're going to do. It seems like they're running back what they did last year with a few new faces. And I don't know how that works out well for them this year. They finished 16th last year. I think they go one spot better. Finish in 15th, but it still is not great for Brentford. But it's still enough to get them to stay up. I don't think they're in true danger of relegation this year. Obviously, things could go wrong, but I don't think they are in that big of a threat right now. Move up to 14th, and we have Everton. They have seemed to be dealing with relegation just year after year after year, and it takes a great escape on one of the final match days. Last year, it was more because of their points deductions that they had to take. And there may be more points deductions coming. I truly don't know. It feels like Everton just find a way to get points deductions. This squad was quite decent last year. If you take away those points deductions, they finished, I think, on 48 points, right around there. which would be pretty good for mid-table. And Sean Dyche, I mean, you can't say anything bad about the man. He is a great football manager, obviously. We saw what he did with Burnley. He's starting to do it again with Everton. I mean, he looks very, it's a very pragmatic approach, and it seems to be working once again. I think there's a chance Everton go higher than 14th. I think they could finish possibly like right at the top half of the table. Like I'm talking like 10th, maybe 11th. I don't think you're competing for a European spot, but I mean, it's still better than, relegation doldrums that they feel like they've been in the past, 3 or 4 years. I think they may finally be edging out of that. I think they are more smooth of a system right now. Of course, they're still looking for new owners at this time. It seems like every time they get into an exclusivity agreement with somebody, that deal falls through. So the money's still not great at the club right now, but Dyche seems to be building another, I won't say a juggernaut, but a very good team with Everton. Of course, this will be the final year for Everton at the historic Goodison Park. They move to the Bramley Moordock Stadium next season. So this will be the final season of, one of England's most, historic grounds. We're starting to lose a lot more of those, more and more by the day. It's going to be sad to see, the Goodison Park go. It's a great stadium, and it does feel like we are losing a bit of the heritage of this sport, stadium-wise. There's nothing we can do about it. Truly, I don't think there's anything we can do. We can just disapprove, but we move on. In 13th, I have Bournemouth. Now, I struggled with Bournemouth because the loss of Solanke, I think, is going to be a huge, huge problem. I know they are trying to bring in a new striker. I know they brought in Enes Unal from Getafe. I don't know if that's the replacement. Maybe they try to bring in somebody else this window. They brought in Cinerista from Leeds. I think that was some good business done there. You brought in Julian Aguero from Barcelona. That move from Barcelona to Bournemouth, that is definitely interesting. I think it's very tough to replace Solanke. He did a lot for this squad, especially last year. You're not going to be able to replace the man, but you can try to replace him in the aggregate. I think they're going to try to piece together something. We'll see, but it's not going to be all sunshine and rainbows for Bournemouth this year, finishing, 10th or something like that. I think it's going to be a little bit more of a struggle. I still think Iraola, the manager, I still think he can find a way to figure all this out because he does seem like a very good, tactician-type manager. So let's move to 12th, and that's where I have the West London side, Fulham. And, Fulham have done some interesting business this summer. They brought in Emile Smith-Rowe from Arsenal. They brought in Jorge Cunha from Villarreal. Ryan Sessegnon returns to the club. But the losses, of Palhinha to Bayern Munich, Bobby De Cordova-Reid, of course, Tim Ream, he just left. Tonsin Adebayo goes basically across the street to Chelsea. It's going to be very interesting to watch this Fulham team this year because this is a team that either can do really well and finish, 10th, 11th, 12th, something like that, or a team that gets dragged into a relegation battle. And if Fulham get dragged into a relegation battle, I don't have a lot of faith that they get out of it. I think it will be a big struggle for them if that ends up happening, I'm hopeful that Fulham, find a way to figure this out. I think they have the potential to be a good squad this year. It's just if results don't start coming, and like you start getting dragged, and you're lingering in 16th, 17th, you get dragged into that, and sometimes there's just no coming out. It's all I got to say. We move to 11th. I have Brighton and Hove Albion. Brighton and Hove Albion, they made an interesting move this summer, bringing in a new manager, a new face, coming over from the second Bundesliga. I'm very interested to see how this goes, because I believe the stat was the new manager brought in Fabian Hutzler. He is 31 years old. I believe they said there are 6 players, maybe 7 players on Brighton that are older than him. That's something. But born in Houston, Texas, spent most of his life in Germany, though. Became the manager of St. Pauli last year. Led them to promotion. I believe they won the title. I could be wrong. I know they got promotion. But he leaves after basically a year and a half in charge, I would say, of St. Pauli. He joined at the end of December or mid-December 2022, and of course leaves at the end of last year, where, in 55 games he managed, he went 36, 12, and 7. That's not awful. Of course, you lost De Zerbi, who knows what happened there, but he ends up going to Marseille in France. I think Brighton take another step back this year. You do have some tough losses, like in Denis Unslav, Pascal Gross, Adam Lallana. I think those are all some tough losses. I think you bring in some interesting names in Minta from Newcastle, Mats Weifler from Feyenoord, Osman from Northgarland. I think there's some interesting names thrown in there. But it's all about how, Fabian Hulitzer figures out this team. I think there may be a little bit of growing pains, which ends up hurting them at the end of the year table-wise. That's why I think they finish at the top of the bottom half of this Premier League. Let's move into the bottom of the top half. And at 10th, I have, yes, surprisingly, Newcastle United. Of course, Newcastle, they were in the Champions League last year. This year, I know that they don't have European football this year, so they're going to have a much less condensed schedule. Truly, I don't know what they're doing any different than they have the past 2 to 3 years. They haven't really brought anybody in. They brought in Lewis Hall from Chelsea. They brought in Vladimoscos, whatever you want to say, the goalkeeper from Nottingham Forest. It's okay, I guess. You lose Elliot Anderson, you lose Menta. I don't see, any major names that are making a change here. This is the same team we've basically seen for what feels like now the 3rd straight year. And you have the England job looming potentially over Eddie Howe. I think that this year Newcastle kind of comes crashing back down to reality from where we saw them, just 2 years ago. They were in a Carabao Cup final. They were finishing top 4. They struggled mightily in the Champions League last year. They didn't even get to the drop down to the Europa League. They finished bottom of their group. Now, they got thrown in a group of death, but at that point, I think they were ahead of schedule for, their new investment with PIF in Saudi Arabia. They were ahead of schedule when they finished 4th. think last year they took a step back, and it kind of feels like they're taking another step back because truly, again, like I said, they aren't really making any changes to this squad this year. And that does worry me a bit. That's why I think they drop a little bit in form once again, but they still find ways to win. Again, this prediction is going to probably be 1,000% wrong. I see Newcastle finishing, bottom of the top half here. In ninth, I have Crystal Palace. I think we could technically interchange Crystal Palace and Newcastle United. I think if Crystal Palace still had basically their squad from last year, which is basically what they have right now, plus Michael Olise, who left for Bayern Munich, I think this team would be very much competing for Europe. Oliver Glasner, they looked like a completely different team under him. If he was brought in, I'd say November, and Roy left earlier, I think Palace may have ended up, finishing in 7th or potentially 6th last year. They looked that good. Now, they made some good deals this summer. They bring in Ismaila Sarr from Marseille. He played at Watford, I believe, a year or two ago. Dachi Kamada from Lazio. He, of course, played for Glasner with that Europa League winning Frankfurt side. So it's a player he is, very used to. But as of now, you're keeping Mark Guehi and Eze, which are two just major cornerstones. Of course, Newcastle are desperately trying to get Guehi right now. They had their third bid turned down by Crystal Palace. If Crystal Palace can keep this team together, I think they get a top half finish. I think it's just not enough for Europe right now, but with the right investment, potentially maybe next year. We move on to 8th, and it's Aston Villa. Now, Aston Villa, they finished in 4th last year. This is a squad that I believe a lot of people have a lot of belief in, that they're going to finish in top 4 once again. But there were a lot of losses this summer. I mean, you lose Diaby to Saudi Arabia for 60 million euros. You lose Douglas Luiz to Juventus. Those are two huge losses. I know you bring in Onana from Everton. You bring in Matson from Chelsea. You bring in Cameron Archer from Sheffield United. Jadon Philogone from Hull City. You're bringing in some very good players. But I think this is a very similar situation to what Newcastle went through last year. The European football Premier League balance just isn't going to work for Aston Villa. I don't think they have the depth for it. I know they brought in, a lot of players, but I trust, Unai Emery to figure this out, but I don't see it happening this year. I think they struggled just like they did last year. Newcastle did last year. They just miss out on Europe once again. And I think, it all depends with how the group stages are technically done now. There is no group of death. You're not going to end up how Newcastle did. But for Aston Villa, I do worry a little bit that this year will be a bit of a struggle for them. That's why I have them finishing in 8th. In 7th, I have West Ham United. So technically, if the winner of the FA Cup and the winner of the Carabao Cup both are already in European spots, this would be a Conference League spot for West Ham. Of course, trophy they have won before. But, of course, that was in a different era for European football. They've brought in a lot of names this summer. They brought in Max Kilman from Wolves. They brought in Chris Somerville from Leeds. Nicholas Fulkrug from Dortmund. Wan-Bissaka from Manchester United. Fotheringham the goalkeeper from Sheffield. He's going to end up being probably about a third stringer, I would think. You got Todabayo from Nice. I know there were Manchester United. I think Tottenham were kind of trying to see if they could get a deal done there. They lose Said Benrahma to Lyon, Flynn Downs to Southampton. Those are basically the two major ones, but no longer managed under David Moyes. You are now under Julian Lopetegui. I thought we were going to see a lot more of him with Wolves. Of course, he steps down right before the season starts last year, and that's how they end up with Gary O'Neill. But this does seem that he can figure this out. West Ham have brought in a lot of players this year, a lot of good quality players, which is why I think they end up finishing this high. Now, it could 1,000% crash and burn. I can 100% see that happening. I think that, Lopetegui can figure it out, and this team will be flying at some point this year, and then they'll drop off again. But I think they do just enough that if things fall their way, they're back in the Conference League once again and potentially run at another European trophy. Let's move on to 6, and that's where I have Chelsea. This just disaster of a team that run by Todd Boehly. They're exactly like Wolverhampton. I don't know what they're doing, except they're doing the opposite of what Wolverhampton are doing, and they're just buying everybody known to man. Pedro Neto, Kieran Dewsbury-Hall, Philip Jorgensen, Omari Kellyman, Renato Vega, Tonson Adebayo. I feel like there's like 10 other names that they bought this summer. And they truly haven't had a lot of departures. I mean, you lost Matson to Villa, Lewis Hall to Newcastle, Omari Hutchinson to Ipswich, Thiago Silva left on a free transfer. Same with Ziyech, he left on a free. Conor Gallagher was going to Atletico Madrid, and now who knows what's happening with that. Does not seem like that is happening anymore. So this team is just, it's a disaster. This team, I believe they have like 48 players right now in the first team squad. It's just, this team's addicted to finding players and saying, I'm giving you a 15-year contract, it seems like, and you're coming to Chelsea. The stat is 36 players saw action for Chelsea in last season. I don't know. I really don't know what they're doing. I mean, Cole Palmer, I think, is going to be a very good player. He had a very good season last year. I think we see more of him this year. I'm excited to see where that goes. I mean, I'm not excited because it's Chelsea. I wish he was with a different team. But this team is good enough to get Europe, and that's if, things can get figured out. Obviously, Mauricio Pochettino, it was a disaster in the beginning of the season, and by the time we got to the end of the season, he was figuring it out, and this team was starting to look dangerous, and of course, that's the time to sack him. So, I don't know. I don't know what Chelsea truly are doing because it's a disaster of a team. What can we say? It's a disaster of a team currently being run like the absolute disaster it is, honestly. That's all that can be said. We move up to 5th. I have Manchester United. I think they could be lower. I don't see them getting much higher than 5th. You bring in some interesting players this summer. You bring in De Ligt and Bazouri, both from Bayern Munich. Zerki, you bring him in. You bring in Yoro from Lille. It's an interesting summer that they've had. I mean, you send out Wan-Bissaka, you send out Van de Beek, Mason Greenwood. Rafael Varane leaves on a free. Anthony Martial, I believe, is still a free agent. Amrabat returns to Fiorentina after his loan. Onana. That's my big worry for Manchester City right now. It's Onana. I truly don't know what they're doing either. New ownership, obviously, that kind of means new tactics. I don't know what they're doing. I don't know why Ten Hag is still the manager. He got extended too. I mean, I know they won the FA Cup, but I'm surprised that they're still in this situation. I feel like Ten Hag is prime candidate to get sacked mid-season, in which case potentially Gareth Southgate shows up on the touchline at Old Trafford. Don't know how that would work out, but who knows? This is going to be another challenging season for United. I don't see Ten Hag making it to the end of the year, to be honest. And I think that very much hurts team chemistry, and that's why I don't see him finishing higher than 5th. I just kind of put him in 5th because I think just the teams below him are worse. At 4th, I have Liverpool. I think this is going to be a very interesting season. The first year post-Klopp, the Arne Slot era begins. I mean, this is another team. They have done nothing this summer. They sold, Carvajal to Brentford. Joel Matip, his contract expired. Alcantara, he just retired. This team, I don't know what they're doing. There's another team I don't know what they're doing because they just haven't done anything this summer. I know there's talk about bringing in a goalkeeper, which probably means Alisson is on the move, would be my guess, because Kelleher has always talked about, being that, backup keeper. I mean, there was talks about Zubimendi finally bringing, finally coming to the club as a signing. They've been searching for a midfielder, a holding type midfielder, which is what Zubimendi is for the past 2 to 3 years. And that fell through because he said, I'm staying at Real Sociedad. So I don't know what the plan is this year. I think they struggle because they don't have any signings. We'll see, of course. There's still time to make a signing. I don't think they do. I think they end up finishing inside Champions League spots, but just barely. So that leaves 3 squads left, 2 in North London and 1 in Manchester. Let's take it to number 3, and that is Tottenham Hotspur. Now, this very much could be personal bias because who knows? We're on a show that specifically talks about Tottenham Hotspur. So it could be bias here. I don't see a way that they don't finish at least top 4 this year. I think bringing in Solanke is what they desperately needed last year. Now, of course, last year's gone. We're in Europa League, which, again, there could be trouble there because of fixture congestion, especially if you continue winning in that, tournament. It gets very difficult at the end of the year. This is a team that was falling apart at the end of the year. They just did not look up to it for, the last month and a half. This is a team that, as I said, brought in Solanke this summer. They brought in Archie Gray from Leeds United. Lucas Bergvall, he technically comes in even though he was purchased last year as he went back on loan to Dunsgaard. I think all 3 of those players are going to be major keys this year. You lose Emerson Royale. That's truly, really the only big, selling of the summer so far. A lot of players going out on loan. Eric Dyer technically leaves now on the free this summer. It was a loan last year, and then, he signs a contract there on a free. I think we're in year 2 of the Postecoglou era. Year 1 felt like establishing an identity. Year 2 feels like implementing that, that identity. That you need your players to show up this year because I doubt there are going to be any more signings just because this is Tottenham Hotspur. You're going to need Son showing up. You're going to need James Maddison to find his form because he has not looked good in the preseason. He has not looked good since he got his injury last year. Brendan Johnson, you're going to need a big step up from him, and you're going to need a big step up from Kulusevski. A lot's going to be asked of this team this year. And with the fixture congestion, we'll see, but I don't see him finishing higher than third. I think fourth or fifth are probably more realistic. I just think those two teams struggle a bit more this year. And at second, finishing up as the bridesmaid. They are always the bridesmaid, never the bride these past few years, and that is Arsenal. I feel like I should go to one with Manchester City first while I just describe these two together. I personally, if this is the last dance, I don't see any world where Pep Guardiola does not win the Premier League this year if this is his final season at Manchester City. I don't see it happening. That is one of the factors why I have them winning the league. Now, they really haven't done much this summer. I got to give them that there. They really haven't done any selling either. Julian Alvarez is basically the one big one this summer. He goes off to Atletico Madrid. Savio is really the only player brought in, and he's from Toys this summer. But, I mean, you can look at Arsenal. They really haven't done much this summer either. Calafiori is brought in from Bologna, and really the only departure is Emile Smith-Rowe. So both sides are basically going into what we saw with them last year. And I expect the same result as last year. Like I said, I don't see a world, if this is Pep Guardiola's final season, I don't see a world where they don't win the title. I know Arsenal gave them a run for their money at the end of the season last year. I just don't see it happening again. I don't think they have... something's going to happen this year that cause Arsenal to slip up again, and that leads right into Manchester City walking into their 5th straight title, I believe. This is your full table, 1 to 20. It's Man City, Arsenal, Tottenham, Liverpool, Man United, Chelsea, West Ham, Aston Villa, Palace, Newcastle, Brighton, Fulham, Bournemouth, Everton, Brentford, Wolves, Ipswich, Nottingham Forest, Leicester City, and Southampton to close it out. So that is officially my predictions for this 2024-25 Premier League season. Like I said, it gets all kicked off this weekend. So make sure you tune in, watch all of that. We'll be back Monday night, first real, top of the perch of the season, recapping the match at Leicester City. Last two teams kick the Premier League season off. We get Monday Night Football. So thank you so much for watching this very extended version of Top of the Perch. If you just stumbled across this video, click like, click subscribe, tell anybody you know about it. Be a lot more coverage of Tottenham Hotspur, of course, this season. Probably throw in a little bit Premier League too. So thank you so much for watching. We will see you again soon here on the Nick Burt Sports Network for another episode of Top of the Perch, or maybe another episode of one of the other plentiful shows on this channel.